It's what's being progressive is really all about. That's a new word for liberal now. Either way, the movement itself is in flux. Is President Obama taking a progressive approach to policy? With me now in New York, Jonah Goldberg, syndicated columnist, author of Liberal Fascism, and historian David Petruzza, author of 1920, The Year of Six Presidents. Both of these books I have devoured. I'm reading yours a second time, and reading yours, David, for the first time. And I have learned more about the country and the history of our country in the 20th century than, I am amazed at what I didn't know and what we're not taught in schools. David, let me start with you. The history of progressive, when you know who they are, you wonder how that has ever kind of went away and now come back as a good thing.
When the progressives started, they were sort of like an outgrowth and a rebranding even of the populist movement, and it was more of an elitist, middle-class kind of thing, and it transmogrified into not just economic change, but moral change and changing the way people live, with prohibition, with the first drug laws, with the Mann Act, with this perfectibility of the human spirit. And then it changes, transmogrifies again into liberalism. And then there's an aspect of that with the New Deal and FDR's administration, which becomes harder and harder left, until by 1948 you end up with Henry Wallace's movement, which is controlled by Communist Party members. And what does it call itself? The Progressive Party.
Okay, so now we have the Progressive Party, and when I started reading this, and then I was watching one of the debates, Hillary Clinton was asked a question, "Are you a liberal?" And she said this. If we have the Hillary...
Mrs. Clinton, how would you define the word liberal? And would you use this word to describe yourself?
I prefer the word progressive, which has a real American meaning, going back to the progressive era at the beginning of the 20th century. I consider myself a modern progressive, someone who believes strongly in individual rights and freedoms, who believes that we are better as a society when we're working together.
Okay, that's pretty much the message that Barack Obama said today. That all these people came over here, and they were dreaming about us having a better life, what I think is bunk. I mean, I'm not thinking about 4 generations down the road. I'm thinking about my children and my grandchildren making a better life for me. And we all get better because we're all doing that, taking care of our families. This is the same message. Why is this a bad message?
Yeah, well, first of all, I love the line in the inaugural address where he said, those people worked in those sweatshops for us. And what he's trying to do there is the same thing he did in his acceptance speech at the Democratic Convention. He's trying to make the pursuit of happiness a collective thing rather than an individual thing. He's trying to make it that we can only all be happy together. We all are linked arm in arm. We are our brother's keepers, he always loves to say, which is a very progressive vision of things. And look, I had grandparents who worked in those sweatshops, and they were not doing it for us writ large. They were doing it for themselves. It was the individual pursuit of happiness. It was for their families and maybe for their children and their children's children, but not for the entire United States of America. But that's what Barack Obama is trying to do. He's trying to frame this as if we are all in it together, and that there is no individual pursuit of happiness. It's only a collective pursuit. And I love the Hillary Clinton line. You know, I bring this up in speeches all the time. Conservatives are required to own their intellectual history to the point where it's an albatross. You know, I'm supposedly a racist if I say I'm for federalism and want more power to the states because states' rights supported segregation and whatnot. But I always like to ask people, so Hillary Clinton says, well, I'm a modern progressive. Even though the progressives were racist, they were eugenicists, they were imperialists, they were all sorts of things. If I said, well, you know, I'm a modern Confederate, you would think, or Mike Huckabee said in the debate, you know, they asked him, are you conservative? Well, I don't like the word conservative. I like to call myself a modern Confederate, which has deep roots in the American tradition. My sense is somebody would say at the New York Times, I can't believe he's saying that. Doesn't he understand the historical connotations? Doesn't he understand where that word comes from and what it brings up? But you can call yourself a progressive, and it just means good. It means you're for good things.
But David, this comes really, here you are, you write history books, you know that this really comes from one of the, a president I never really learned about in school at all, Woodrow Wilson. What an SOB this guy was. This is the guy who came back from Princeton, and he really affected how we look at everything in history, history books, right?
Right. Now, and he's able to turn policy around on a dime. He's reelected in 1916 as he kept us out of the war. He's inaugurated in March. In April, we're at war. he changes his positions on women's suffrage, and he resegregates or segregates the federal government. Again, what you're talking about, the racist history of progressivism, when Theodore Roosevelt, the great progressive, founds his Progressive Party in 1912, they banned black delegates from that convention. They are going to make their deal with the white segregationist South. These things are not all pure for the progressive movement. They say they want great things, but they often want them at the expense of others in terms of, we were talking earlier in the green room, that if you want to condemn something, don't just condemn greed. There's another great vice out there in this society right now, and it's growing and growing and growing. It's called envy. And you're going to redistribute wealth. The progressives had the 16th Amendment for the income tax back then. It's a continuation of that, and I think we're going to see more and more of that redistributionist envy philosophy.
Did either of you guys see the line that Barack Obama said in the speech today? I don't know if we have it, about restoring science to its rightful place. Do we have that from the speech? Go ahead and roll it.
We will restore science to its rightful place and wield technology's wonders to raise healthcare's quality and lower its cost. We will harness the sun and the winds and the soil to fuel our cars and run our factories, and we will transform our schools and colleges and universities to meet the demands of a new age.
I didn't know we were living in the Dark Ages. Who has been rejecting science? Is that, because what I read that as is, we have rejected because people, or flat earthers like me that don't believe in man-made global warming, we've rejected science? Is that what he's saying?
Well, no, I took that actually, Brett mentioned in the earlier segment about how some conservatives thought Obama was being ungracious towards Bush. And I actually am one of those people. I think this is one of the tensions in the speech. He at the one time wants to say we're in this new wonderful bipartisan era, but at the same time he has to cast the era we're emerging from, the Bush era, as this incredibly dark and primitive and terrible time.
But where have we rejected science?
But that's what he's talking about throughout the campaign, on embryonic stem cell research, on all of these
Which
things.
they were wrong on.
Yeah,
I mean, it came out and they were wrong on it.
But he won saying these things, and this is one of his shots to say, I represent truth and light in a new era and all the rest. And I thought, he may not have meant it as an ungracious thing, but if you take in the context of the other things he said about how we're going to restore liberty and restore, security, all these sorts of things, he really was saying that the guy 5 feet from me was responsible for all of these terrible things, which I know he believes, but your inaugural address is not necessarily the place to say it.
Okay, we're going to come back to you guys in just a second. I want to go to Gary Walters. Gary is a guy that has actually helped presidents move.
If you haven't already done so, join the Campaign for Liberty. www.campaignforliberty.com.